Welcome to AbbeyCast. Welcome back to AbbeyCast, I should say. We took a little bit of a break, a little bit of a hiatus, as we got into a very busy schedule of programming and hosting groups and private retreats here, but we are grateful and glad to be back. And today we have with us Mrs. Maria Lynch. Maria is the co-leader of the spiritual direction team here at Daylesford Abbey, and we are very grateful to have her with us today. So Maria, thanks for being with us on AbbeyCast.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
For
Thank you
sure.
for the invitation.
Absolutely. And we've connected a number of times before for different projects and ideas here, how the Abbey can, provide a more open and hospitable and, nurturing environment for those that are seeking spiritual direction. Mm-hmm. But it's great to be able to sit down with you today and to share with a larger audience about what it is or who you are, what it is that you do here, and how that might speak to other people who are seeking on their journey. So
that's great. Well, thank you again for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So would you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, a little bit about yourself, and how you got connected to the Abbey?
Sure. First of all, I am a mother of 5 and a grandmother of 5. So I'm very blessed to have a family that's continuing to grow.
That's great.
So I guess
And you have young grandchildren too,
I do,
right? Yeah.
I do. They range in ages from 5 down to 6 months.
So you are an active babysitting grandparent.
I do.
Yeah.
One day per family.
That's beautiful.
Okay, with
That's
5 kids, eventually that'll turn out to be full time. But
Yeah.
for right now, it's just 2 or 3 days a week.
Great.
But anyway, that gives me the flexibility to do some of the other things. Very dear to my heart, and one of them, of course, is being a spiritual director.
Yeah.
Okay. But in addition to wearing a Nonna hat, i.e. grandmom hat, I also still enjoy keeping my hand in my professional career before spiritual direction, which was being a math teacher. I've taught math for over 35 years, and at this stage of my life, it's very part-time. I'm taking a little break from my adjunct position at Cabrini, but I still do some private tutoring, so I do enjoy putting on the math teacher hat once in a while.
Once a teacher, always a teacher.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. That's what my husband always told me.
Yeah.
I never believed him, but it's true. Put me in front of a classroom, and
Once
that's my little piece of heaven.
You're in it for life. Yeah, it is a little piece of heaven.
Yeah. So I'm privileged to be in that role for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it was while I was still teaching full time. This goes back some years. I really felt like the Lord was inviting me to something more. And I kind of always knew, I've always been involved with some sort of ministry, even throughout my young adulthood. But I just knew that, the Lord had something else. And so, through some, seeking and discerning and investigating, I came to learn that spiritual direction was, what the Lord was inviting me to. And so I looked at programs, and it was actually through the program at Newman that I met someone who connected me to the Abbey.
Okay.
And so, when I got my certification and whatnot, there were positions here that were open, and so I applied, and here I am, and been very happy since.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So for our audience who is unaware as to what spiritual direction is, could you define that?
If you go on the SDI website, which is Spiritual Directors International, I mean, there are many, many different definitions, like what is spiritual direction, but here's my definition,
Sure.
Okay? It's a relationship that helps one to grow in a deeper relationship with God. So that relationship between the director and the directee is really meant to foster a more important relationship, and that is with our God. So that for me is my definition.
Very good. So how did you yourself personally encounter or discover, or whatever that journey was for you? How did you come into contact with spiritual direction?
Okay, so, in thinking about that, I've always had a spiritual mentor per se.
That was actually going to be my next question. Was it a person who kind of showed you that as a mentor?
Yeah, I mean, I've always had a spiritual mentor. I mean, I can remember even back to my college days, sitting with, this one sister, and, we would just share my spiritual journey, like my walk with the Lord, and, discerning, and, what are my next steps, and all that kind of thing.
So it wasn't a formal thing?
No, no. And as I look back too, there was always someone that God put in my life to be more of a. Many times they were my friends. Okay, as a matter of fact, most times they were my friends. But it wasn't
good friends to have then.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then there came a point in my journey where it became a little more of an intentional seeking to find someone who was a certified certified. My husband is a certified financial planner. Sorry about that.
They're good to have too.
Yeah, they're good to have. You need those in life. But a certified spiritual director.
Right.
Okay, someone who is trained in the field, and who again will invite the directee to a deeper prayer life and a deeper relationship. And again, my previous mentors, they were, again, most of them were my friends, and they certainly walked with me, but there came a point in my my journey where I wanted to go deeper, and so that's when I started, really seeking out a spiritual director.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So then what led you to the... Well, actually, before I get into that question, what gifts maybe, did you find within your experience of being a directee that perhaps led you to that transition of becoming a director?
Right. Well, I certainly grew in my own spiritual life, but what happened was, more specifically, I was able to see God acting in my life more. Okay. With the help of a director, my life didn't really change. I mean, the day in and day out, everything was, still happening. Nothing dramatically different happened, but the director was able to help me to see God more in my everyday, and offer some insights on how I could possibly sometimes adopt a slightly different prayer form, or something that would help me to go deeper into my relationship, in addition to that raised awareness of God.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you pointed out that it's like a raised awareness, that your day wasn't changing all that much. Your routine was pretty much the same.
Right.
Father Safferny gave a homily at this point. I want to say maybe it was a month or 2 months ago. I've kind of lost track of time, but he was talking about being able to recognize God's presence in your everyday life. And he even worked in a little bit of neuroscience with that, talking about neural pathways and how our brain, literally forms these channels, these pathways of connection that are associated with anything from pain, physical pain, to spiritual pain, to joy, to all the ranges of emotions and experiences and associations. And we can quite literally form neural pathways where we have these channels of being able to recognize God in our everyday life. And so that's maybe something that brain science will really get into in the future. But
is that like that practice makes perfect kind of mentality? That
pretty much, right?
That if you're in that habit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we talk about like a spiritual practice, right? That people have, whether you just talked about different forms of prayer that you might be able to use to enhance that relationship or deepen that relationship in some way. Yeah. And one other thing that I'd like to just point out as being very interesting to me as the listener of your sharing here is you mentioned the mentor, and I said that was going to come up as a question for me. I'm a fan of the mythologist Joseph Campbell. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. He really looked at world mythology and world religions and anything that was, kind of more symbolic in that way, and looked at it as a process occurring within us universally. And he talks about the hero's journey, where the hero experiences some call to adventure, like to the world unknown, out of his unknown world. And usually one of the first things that happens once the hero answers that call intentionally, which is another word that you use, right? You kind of were finding yourself in these relationships with people, with your friends, where you could talk about your spiritual journey, but then it became an intentional choice.
Right.
And like you're answering the call, entering that world of the unknown, and then the mentor just kind of appears. It's a very mystical thing, right? But it says something too about our journey deeper into God. It is a journey of unknowing, right? Of, in some cases, unlearning things that we have been taught or assumed or whatever about spiritual growth and just God in general, right? Or about life.
Right.
So those are all really powerful things you've already shared that I'm really grateful for. So.
But something that comes to mind too is, being a math teacher for so many years, I mean, my brain is very analytical, okay? I want to solve problems, I want to see a step-by-step progression and get to that, final answer. Okay?
Finding that missing piece, right?
yeah, right. And I love puzzles and all of that kind of thing, But what I have come to learn is that certainly, spiritual direction is almost the antithesis of that. We're not there to solve a problem, okay? The spiritual director or companion, I like to use the word companion, is really there to help, a directee to hold whatever it is that they are, presented with in life. Not necessarily to strategize, how to solve the problem. Okay? Yeah. And that's where, there's a little difference there with, a therapist or a counselor.
Right.
Sometimes there are more, processes in place to try to make the situation better somehow. Okay?
And there usually is an issue or a problem or difficulty that propels that person into seek a therapist, right?
Absolutely. And many times, because I do the intake for the Abbey as far as people calling in or emailing, and that is a question that I will ask, like what has what's bringing you to seeking spiritual direction at this time?
Yeah.
And typically what I find is that people are just seeking more and deeper relationship with God. Sometimes, it could be through a life event,
right.
A death or, some sort of significant change in their lives.
Right.
But generally, people are just, there's the Spirit is stirring within them, calling out more, like I want more. And so, that's what prompts them to make a phone call or send an email.
Yeah, that's great. And there certainly is a network that is out there, because I will sometimes just by chance get those phone calls for whatever reason, get directed to my line. And the person will quite often say, the pastor of my parish or, a friend from church or something referred me to the Abbey, and they said that, I should look into spiritual direction or something like that,
Right.
So it's very much in tune with, what you've been conveying about your own journey along this. So that's important, to know that there is a sense of community and togetherness, and we're not on our own on this journey.
We are not meant to travel alone.
Yeah,
I mean, we are really companions for the journey, here for one another. And, I feel so blessed to be part of the community here at the Abbey, and, just to have the, this sacred space to sit with people. I hope and pray that, the ministry really stays vibrant. I mean, again, I take most of the calls and people are still seeking, So as long as they're seeking, we really hope to provide the venue to
make that possible.
Yeah, make that possible.
Yeah, and it certainly is a team effort. We've seen just like sharing kind of internally here from what's been going on within the Abbey over the past really the kind of like 2 years going on now since COVID, where we've seen a huge uptick in private retreatants coming here. We did have some private retreatants that would make a retreat here at the Abbey in years past, as has been told to me, but it was primarily groups that were using our space here. And now that we have seen really a huge influx in private retreats, which is a beautiful new ministry to embrace, we've also seen an increase in requests for spiritual direction. So there we are kind of, working together in that way where, you're using this space to serve God's people in a way that is really essential for our growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thank you too for clearing up that difference between spiritual direction and therapy or counseling, because that's something that if people aren't aware of what those terms really imply professionally,
Right.
Like I have a background in some psychology, but I will not say I'm a psychologist, or I will not speak authoritatively about it.
Right.
I'll say I'm a theologian and I can speak about these things, and this is some of what I know. But so that's very important that you distinguish those things. And it is too important to point out what you mentioned, that it is about a seeking of a deeper relationship with God that really leads one into direction. But that can sometimes in life be propelled by a life event that is an issue, a trauma, a challenge, something like that. I think it's Richard Rohr who says that is like one of the 4 or 5 types of events that can kind of propel us into more conscious spiritual growth, as something that in some way is like a cavalry moment for us and kind of breaks us down. But there are also those just experiences of awe and beauty, or a desire for more, that can lead us into that too, which is really important to point out too, because spiritual growth, I think, and maybe you could comment a little bit more about this, leads us to a place of more authenticity and feeling more comfortable of who we are in God's presence. I mean, would you care to kind of elaborate there?
Absolutely. I think our world tries to tell us who we need to be, how we are to dress, what we are to eat, all of these external voices that we hear around us, again, trying to, dictate the kind of person that we should be in order to be somehow successful, people, to be honest, Andrew, I think that, the root of a lot of, struggles in life are people being disappointed when they're not meeting those expectations, okay, whether they're self-imposed or whether they're imposed by others. But if and again, this is me personally, if as a spiritual director, companion, I can, invite the individual to see themselves in God's eyes, like what is God's plan for you? Like, what is God inviting you to do next? Not necessarily what the world might be inviting. And what happens is, and this is from my own life, you do get more comfortable with who you are. You're, I call it a holy confidence. I mean, I'm not, I don't want to say you become more confident, because sometimes, people think that that's somewhat arrogant, okay? Right. None of that at all. It's a very humble confidence that, I am a child of God, He has created me for good purpose, and, I want to seek out how to live my life in accordance with His will, so that I can not only, serve Him and serve others, but also become my best self.
Very well put. Very well put. Yeah, being that best self, that authentic self, that true self.
The true self, like
Thomas Merton. Right, exactly. Right. That is, the goal of our spiritual journey, right? Because that true self is not statically defined. It's something that is dynamic in Christ, and changing and evolving, and always seeking to be better in some way.
Right.
My wife Mary is always so excited when she works with older people who are really eager to learn new things. They're not held up by I can't learn that. It's a computer or whatever. Like there's like a real, even if it's like a simple task, like sending an email, like I just see such a big smile come to her face when that happens, because I think things like that, and I'm a student of the work of Pierre Desjardins, the Jesuit mystic and scientist, and he was very into evolution, the evolution of the cosmos, but more importantly, our spiritual evolution towards God. And he talks about, these points of growth within our spiritual journey, that at sometimes are actually diminishments. They're breaking us down, but those breakdowns are there to help build us up in some way.
And there's growth in that resistance or that breakdown too.
That's
Just
right.
like there's growth in, when life's going well, and you can move on to the next step. Sometimes, that broken step or that misstep will take us further in our journey.
Yeah. So, in terms of like the kind of person that you work with as a director, the sort of person that's like a directee, what I know that you've said kind of like what it is that draws someone into seeking out spiritual direction is wanting that deeper relationship with God, and but maybe who is often the kind of person, if that's an appropriate question to ask, that you find being drawn in. I mean, I don't want to say are they a person that's in college or older, man, woman, but are there any other deeper characteristics that are there? Is it someone who maybe has come from a different faith tradition, or they've strayed away from the faith tradition they were raised in? Or are they someone who has been very faithful to their tradition and maybe is just seeking to go deeper?
Yeah. You know what, Andrew? I mean, I could probably check a box on all of the things that you've said.
Okay. Yeah.
So, as far as the directees that I meet with, I mean, some are very devout Catholics. Some are of Protestant, faith tradition, and a variety of them. Some are struggling with their faith. Some, as I said, are very devout and they just want to, be better. Some have strayed and have come back. So, it's really hard to, generalize other than, whatever path that they are on, they recognize that there's more, okay? And that, they are seeking the more, the deeper. And, again, men and women, I'm thrilled to, also sit with some young moms.
Okay.
I did not, as a young mom, I had a mentor, but I was not in, formal spiritual direction at the time. But I think it's just wonderful that, younger women are seeking it as well.
Yeah, and thank you for answering that question very gracefully. Really, I struggled to get it out, but I was really asking it more for whoever might be listening or tuning into this. For someone who is just, by chance, watching and says oh, well, that's interesting what they're talking about, but maybe it's not for me. I just kind of wanted to hear a smattering of the different walks of life and situations in life that people present themselves as being within to you and seeking this direction. So I know you've kind of touched on a few things as you've shared your own journey with this and your experience in working with people, but really, what do you value most from spiritual direction? I would maybe ask that in two ways, both as a director, but then as also someone who receives direction.
Right.
And if I can tack on another question.
Am I going to remember all this, Andrew?
I'll remind you. I'm
okay.
a former teacher too, right? So I have to remember the questions myself.
Okay.
And there's a third question. How important is receiving spiritual direction for you as someone who gives spiritual direction?
Okay.
So first question is, what are the gifts, or what do you really value most about giving spiritual direction to people?
So I'm actually going to combine the first and second
However
question.
you wish to answer those convoluted questions.
No problem.
I trust you.
So I have been blessed with a what I consider a ongoing and loving relationship with my God. I don't know that there has ever been a time in my life where I have not felt God. And so, being in, as a directee, again, my director would, continue to help me along that journey of seeing God, and again, growing deeper in relationship. But what I, even before I pondered that, the thought of becoming a director, I thought, if I could help anyone get to know God the way that I know God, or in a way that they're invited to know God, just the more, then I would think that that's such a privilege. It would be such a privilege and an honor to really walk with someone and, have them grow in their relationship of a loving God, and a God who does love and cares for them.
That's right.
Every detail, from, big picture, questions to the little itty bitty details of their life. So it was, what I guess the relationship that I have with my God, or with the God, I just was wanting to in some way help others, to maybe develop that in their own life.
Yeah, very well put. And I guess that really is kind of, like the heart of the Christian life is just serving in some way, right?
Yeah,
and serving in a way that is relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a ministry that, again, it was not on my radar, 20 years ago, maybe even about 10 years ago, it started to kind of, surface. But, it wasn't something that I even knew existed 30 or 40 years ago. So, some of the questions I get was like, well, what, again, your first question, what is spiritual direction? People don't even really know what it is. But once you do discover it as a spiritual practice, it really can produce a lot of good fruit, and as I sit with directees, month after month, as a matter of fact, I just had an appointment this morning with a, lovely young woman, and, it's just so, I am in awe of the work that God does in people, as I, sit with them and listen to them, month after month. And it really is, it's a work of God, but they're open and receptive to, what God wants to do in their lives.
That's great. And I think, maybe in going back to that kind of confused question I asked about, like, what's the type of person who seeks spiritual direction is openness is big.
Yes.
Openness is huge.
Yeah.
I would imagine humility.
Yes.
Someone who realizes that they're not the center of the universe is, and we all, can, have an ego, and it comes into play at times more than others, but, to realize that we're part of something much, much bigger than we could ever really conceive of.
Absolutely. And, it's something, too, that's beyond our control.
That's right.
While I do have some, and I'll put myself in this category, there's that sense that, we have to be in control all the time, I have to know what I'm doing today. And
that's a big cultural thing.
It is. Like, get your agenda set up and your schedule for the day, and, you got to stick to it, make sure you get all your, boxes checked off, but, a life with God, needs to be a little more flexible than that.
Yeah.
And again, it's a work in progress, okay? And I'm not myself included in this category where, it's just that daily surrendering, that you have to embrace, and, to allow God into your day. And sometimes there's interruptions, and sometimes there's surprises, both good and bad. But, but with God, and again, that's that raised awareness of God's presence in your life. With God, nothing is impossible.
Right, because God is within those interruptions and
It
surprises
is. Right,
in some odd way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a big part of that openness and humility is like we're always being stretched, right? God is always stretching us to be more aware of, the beauty of God's presence in all things, even in those situations that try us, especially the people that try us, right? And they're all opportunities for growth, even if they are struggles for us. They're they're grist for the mill in that way, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So could you, as we kind of start to wrap things up here, could you give a snapshot of what a spiritual direction session looks like? For someone who has never experienced it, like, the time where you might meet, that sort of thing, and, frequency.
Sure. I mean, typically they are an hour-long session once a month, and well, of course now with, the pandemic, we've offered virtual meetings as well on Zoom. But we also have, the lovely spaces here at the Abbey to meet with people.
We have a specific space here for that with different suites so people can meet intimately and privately.
Absolutely, right. And, so the meetings are about once a month. But that does vary too, depending on the directee. But typically that's the average. And, I typically begin a session just with a period of silence and, inviting the Holy Spirit to come into our space and our time. Because again, the whole thing is a work of the Spirit, we're just there to, help facilitate that work.
Right.
And then it's really, again, I don't ever come in with an agenda or, and I certainly don't ever, take notes and say, well, let's check up on, how you did with X, Y, or Z from last time. I mean, there's none of that.
Right.
It's all really directee driven, whatever the directee brings to the session.
Okay. That's excellent. Thank you so much. So I hope that this opportunity to sit down with Maria today has spoken to anyone out there who might be looking for a deeper engagement with God, with God's presence in creation, with God's presence within your loved ones, your communities, your families. Right? There's always an opportunity to go deeper into that mystery, and it certainly is an advised recommendation to have companion along the way was the word that you used, right? Not necessarily a director, but
I like the word companion.
Better.
Yeah. I mean, the director, I guess is a formal, title that has been used for many, many years. I tend to like the word companion a little bit more.
Yeah, but it's also important to recognize that there are training programs that people go through to become certified. So,
right. And all of our directors are certified here.
Right. So that title director is important in some ways. Right. It's good to know that your doctor went to medical school.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. Sure.
So, those things are important, but really getting to the heart of it, it's companionship. And that's also really at the heart of the Christian life is being in relationship with one another.
Absolutely. Yes. And also too, to be encouraged by the fact that not everyone that comes to spiritual direction has a good relationship with God. It really runs the gamut. Some are not in a good place with God. And they want to get to a better place. And then so wherever you are, there's always more.
Very well said. There's always more. Yeah, we're always seeking that more. Always seeking that. Glory within all things, for sure, as the Jesuits like to say, right?
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Well, Maria, this has been a real treat to sit down and be able to talk with you today and learn some more about spiritual direction myself. It's something where I think as long as you have that openness, you're always going to encounter someone's perspective that kind of broadens yours. So thank you for doing that today and, expanding my perception. But is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners about spiritual direction before we kind of wrap up here?
I would be remiss if I didn't say a thank you to all of the directors here at Daylesford Abbey. I mean, we have such a wonderful group of people that really include men and women. We also have a few priests. We have some of our team. They're all Christian Christian spiritual directors, but some are of the Protestant faith tradition. So we really have a nice variety of backgrounds that people are coming with. And so when we get the call and we do an intake, we try to have the Spirit lead us to a good match for that person. So again, I'm just so grateful for the commitment that these directors, make to really companioning others on their journey.
That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being with us today and for all you had to share. I hope that our audience finds this worthwhile to listen to. It's certainly been a treat for me to be on the other side of this conversation. So this has been a great episode to jump back into AbbeyCast with. So Maria, thank you for being our first guest on our return from hiatus here. It's been great to talk with you today.
It was a privilege and an honor. Thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely.
All right,
and
take care.
We'll look forward to hearing from anyone who might be reaching out for spiritual direction. You can reach out to us here at the Abbey. The email for the spiritual directors is spiritualdirector@daylesford.org. So you can reach out to Maria that way. She is one of the leaders. There is a man who is a leader as well. We have a man leader and a woman leader as to address the different directees that way from an outreach perspective. So you can reach out to that email and we will be in touch with you. If you'd like to reach out to the Abbey, we are here at 610-601-8702. You can always check us out at daylesford.org. Thanks so much for your support and we'll see you again next time. Thanks,
Okay.
Maria.
Thank you. Bye-bye.